Hello. This is going to be short because I'm still not completely over the cough, which will, if I cough on the video, make it less than desirable audio quality. It's already not great audio quality, I realize. Between uh, not the greatest equipment and, of course, my voice still being shot from this cough. But today is 26th of December, 2018, Boxing Day. So tomorrow is 27th of December. It is the 75th anniversary of Operation Ulusy. Ulusy is the Kalmyk word, also in other Mongol languages, meaning people or territory, and it refers to Ukaz number 115/144, 27th December 1943, the Soviet government ordering the deportation of all the Kalmyks in the Kalmyk Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic into Siberia and placed them under special settlement restrictions, where they remained until 17th of March 1957. And then later in 1958, they are allowed to finally return back to restored Kalmyk territory, initially only autonomous oblast, but it is eventually upgraded to a full autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic like it had been before its abolition on 27th of December 1943. So the Kalmyks are a Buddhist Mongol people. They look Mongol, they're Asiatic. They arrived on the northwestern shore of the Caspian Sea in the 16th century, traditionally nomadic, were in conflict and in cooperation with the various Tsarist governments until finally being forcibly incorporated under Catherine the Great in the 18th century, when about half of them, those on the eastern side of the river of the Volga, made a long trek back to Zungaria in western China, and many of them died on the way, and those that did not die on the way or upon arrival were assimilated into the Mongol, Chinese, and other populations from the Chinese Empire. So basically, the Kalmyks, who are the descendant of four Mongol tribes that were not part of Genghis Khan's coalition, and that later made it out as Zungarians to the northwest shore of the Caspian Sea. Their only remaining remnant is in the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. The 1887 census counts 190,000 of them, and this was a hike for a very long time. During the 20th century, there was a massive decrease in their population due to Soviet repression and war and famine. And by 1949, there's only 78,000 Kalmyks left in the USSR, so less than half. So during the Second World War, the western parts of the Kalmyk ASSR come under German rule, and there are, of course, NKVD partisan units attacking the German supply lines. So the Germans organized a Kalmyk Cavalry Corps. As many as 5,000 Kalmyks may have fought in the Kalmyk Cavalry Corps, and other German military units engaged in anti-partisan warfare. But about 20,000 Kalmyks fought in the Soviet Red Army against the Nazis. And at the end of 1942, beginning in 1943, there is the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, not too far away. The Soviets pushed the Nazis out of western regions of the Kalmyk steppe. They pushed the Germans further west, begin the advance towards Berlin. And so there's about a year between the Germans being removed from the western Kalmyk steppe and the mass deportation of the entire Kalmyk population in the territory as punishment for collaboration with the Nazi regime. And the punishment extends to women and children. Less than 19,000 of the 93,000 people forcibly deported 28th and 29th December 1943, are adult men. The rest are women and children. And they have very high morbidity and mortality rates. 1,640 people are recorded dying in transit to Siberia. They are sent to Omsk Oblast, Novosibirsk Oblast, Krasnoyarsk Krai, and Altai Krai. And then by 1948, another 16,000 or so recorded dying in exile. They are mobilized for various forms of labor, working on kolkhozes, working in forestry, working in mines, particularly mica, very bad for the lungs, very high rates of death from tuberculosis among the Kalmyks. A number are mobilized in the fishing industry, particularly in the Arctic rivers of northern Omsk Oblast. Over 15,000 Kalmyks are sent to the northern part of Omsk Oblast to work in the fishing industry, to take fish out of the frozen river to provide protein for the Soviet Red Army. Kalmyks in the Red Army are demobilized and sent to labor army units, particularly Shurokogolog, where they build a hydroelectric complex. But they are under the legal restrictions of the special settlement regime. They can't leave their assigned area of residence without NKVD permission. And their work assignments are controlled by the NKVD, and they are subject to extreme poverty. They had been pastoralists. They lose all of their livestock, and they are put in unfamiliar jobs. None of them are really given livestock initially, and they are never given full compensation for the huge amount of livestock they lost. And this leads, of course, to massive malnutrition and hunger among the population, and greatly contributes to their death from both malnutrition and, of course, disease as a result of weakened immune system from lack of proper nourishment, especially death from tuberculosis, the main cause of death among the exiled Kalmyks. They lose about 20% of their population during these 4 years, perishes prematurely as a result of the very poor material conditions they are subjected to by the Soviet dictatorship. They are released on 17th of March 1957 from special settlement restrictions, and in 1958 Soviets restore a Kalmyk autonomous oblast, and they later upgrade it to its initial status, its previous status before 1943 of the Kalmyk Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic. And most of the surviving Kalmyks are allowed to return to this territory and attempt to reestablish their national life and existence. But a lot of damage is done to the culture, particularly in loss of ability to speak the Kalmyk language, read and write the Kalmyk language, loss of traditional Buddhist religious practices and customs, kind of enforced Sovietization, but of course no real assimilation. Easier for the Soviets to pull this off than with some other nationalities, because there is a distinct visual racial difference between the Kalmyks and Russians and other European nationalities within the USSR. So even though the Kalmyks are within the European part of the RSFSR, they are racially Mongol and visibly distinct, as well as linguistically and religiously distinct from the dominant Russian nationality, as well as some of the more favored nationalities in the USSR, Belarusians, Jews, etc. So they suffer greatly and immensely during this time period, this 13 years in forced exile in Siberia. It is a great trauma, and this is the 75th anniversary of the deportation, 27th of December being the day that the Soviet government orders the forced removal of all Kalmyks from the Kalmyk ASSR and the liquidation of the Kalmyk ASSR. And the 28th and 29th, a mere 2 days, more than 93,000 people, mostly women and children, forcibly relocated and resettled in the cold and alien. The population is mostly Russian around them. Areas of Siberia, they are settled in compact, already settled kolkhozes. That is houses that already have Russians living in them. Most of the Kalmyks at the time didn't speak Russian. They, of course, suffer heavy discrimination on a variety of fronts, including education, and of course employment during this time. So this is, I suppose I'm going to do a series. I missed the Karachay November because I was in Sacramento talking about the deportation of ethnic Germans in 1941. But the next one will be February 23rd, the Chechens in English. And hopefully that will go a bit better because my voice should have returned by then and the cough should hopefully be gone. So I'll wrap this up here. A little over 12 minutes so far with this. So see everybody later.